Kia ora, I'm Chelsea Daniels, and this is The Front Page, a daily podcast presented by the New Zealand Herald. In 7 minutes, thieves entered the Louvre in Paris and made off with 8 priceless jewels. The necklaces, earrings, brooches and crowns had belonged to an array of 19th century royals, including Napoleon's wife Marie-Amelie and Empress Eugenie, married to Napoleon III. The gang were organised, professionals, and had clearly scoped the world's most visited gallery and knew exactly what they were after. But after you've jumped all of those hurdles of security, what do you do with this highly recognisable royal regalia? Today on The Front Page, art historian, author and curator Dr Penelope Jackson is with us to take a look at heists in general and whether it's really like the movies. Right, so Penelope, here's what we know so far. It happened on a Sunday, about 9:30am local time, shortly after the museum opened. 4 thieves used a vehicle-mounted mechanical lift to access the Gallery of Apollo via a balcony. They cut through the glass panes, got in, threatened guards, stole the items from 2 glass display cases, tried to set fire to the truck below, dropped a crown in their escape. I mean, it's all the makings of a Netflix movie. From your expertise, what was your first reaction to seeing this?
Yeah, well, look, when I woke up and read about it in the news, I kind of instantly thought about the brazenness of it, the audacity of how they went about it in broad daylight, just, half an hour after the Louvre opened. And then I thought it's obviously very sad for the French nation. I mean, this is, part of their history, their cultural history, etc. So that's really sad because, these items, it's highly likely they won't come back in the form that they were stolen in. But also it made me think about, every day in the Louvre, there's a cap of 30,000 visitors. That's a lot of people that go there every day. And if you're, a tourist there and this is your once in a lifetime trip to the Louvre and you were in that vicinity, how very scary that is. And I don't think, the media hasn't really kind of made that point in a lot of instances that really, yes, the security has been kind of put into question, but actually the 5 security guards there were threatened and they protected the visitors that were in that space. So yeah, I was thinking how scary that would be to be in that inside that Netflix movie, as you said. It would be an awful situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without giving away too many ideas, I suppose, how are heists usually done? Is this plan fairly typical or is it just atypical given the brazenness, like you said?
Look, every heist is different because obviously it happens in a different place and there would be a different motivation or they're after different objects. But I think in this case, there would have been a lot of planning. They would have thought about when to have it, how, they'd organised a flat deck truck with a furniture ladder that, moves. And then they had motor scooters ready when they exited. They had glass cutters for the window. So, yeah, this was highly organised. They probably would have visited that gallery several times and done their homework beforehand to work out how they would get in, move quickly, because the whole thing happened, inside 7 minutes. Well, another report said actually 4 minutes. Well, that's how long it takes to boil an egg. It's pretty quick to drive up, park, get that ladder up to the second floor, cut the window, get in, cut the cases, get the objects out and escape. And clearly they were in a hurry because they dropped, one item. Though that's actually damaged now because they dropped it. So, highly organised.
Does this show that there are glaring gaps in the Louvre's security measures?
That's obviously what people are asking. And certainly when something like this happens, it will put their security under scrutiny. There's no doubt about that. But, the alarms did ring, so they worked, and there were 5 guards nearby. But as I said, 30,000 people visit a day. There are in excess of 30,000 objects on display at any one time. It's a huge organisation. And, it's always that difficult thing that you want people to see objects and enjoy them. And these pieces were in glass cases, but how else can you protect them? I mean, it's the Mona Lisa, of course, in the same building. She's behind glass, and that actually deflects from seeing the painting up close, having that experience. And so, yeah, it's a really hard call between having the objects out there for visitors to enjoy and experience and protecting them. But yeah, look, I'm sure the Louvre will be looking at their security. There will be, a full investigation and report. But it's a bit of a kind of, whenever this happens, it's a bit of a wake-up call for other museums and galleries around the world to think, okay, let's not be lax. Let's just, rethink what we do. So in a way, I guess that's significant. But, the other thing about security guards is that they have a huge responsibility to protect objects around the world in museums and galleries, and yet you will find that most of them, the majority, will be on minimum wage. And so often, if there are budget cuts, they get rid of security staff. I mean, just last week, the Art Gallery in New South Wales announced cuts, and among those cuts were security staff. So it's a difficult situation, but I mean, you've got to protect the objects because museums are about caring and looking after objects.
In September, I saw that thieves took porcelain worth about 6 million euros from a museum in France. The haul could well have been commissioned by a foreign buyer, the article I read said. How prevalent is this kind of thing? I'm guessing these people who have so much money that the only thing they're left wanting in the world is something that money can't buy.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what we call stolen to order. And look, you can only speculate in this situation, why those particular works were targeted. As I said, you've got, something like 38,000 objects in the Louvre on display, and they went very specifically for these 9 objects. But, like anything, you've got to think the other side, okay, they've taken them, but what can the new owner do with them? And very little. They could keep them in a secret cupboard at home and look at them. I mean, with the pieces of jewellery, you can't exactly turn up to the Met Gala wearing them because now they are all over the internet, which is, the fabulous thing about the world that we live in now and technology, that those images, any heist, whether it's a painting, royal jewels, porcelain, whatever, they can get images out there straight away. So anyone trying to sell them is going to come unstuck, basically. Yeah, so there's kind of, they could be stolen to order, but, we don't know the motivation.
Well, it's really unfortunate, actually, because with the jewels, obviously, they're so recognisable that the only thing that you can assume that someone would do when they steal such a thing is chop them up into pieces and melt them down. Is that what usually happens?
Yeah, look, I think in this kind of situation, it's not like a painting where you can't change its physical properties very easily. In this situation, they could. I mean, one of those, I think it was the tiara or the crown, had literally had thousands of gems in it, diamonds, emeralds, you name it. And they were big too, so they could all be split up separately and divided. That's highly likely that could happen. They could melt down the metals as well, and that's a pretty quick process. The problem is, unless they go to someone who really knows what they're doing, those stones could actually be damaged in the process of removal or breaking down. And the other thing is, of course, they've got no provenance either. In other words, the history of ownership, they can't legitimately sell them because someone's going to say, oh, well, where did this great big diamond the size of it and whatever come from? And of course, they haven't got they'd have to make up a backstory. So it's kind of that's complicated in itself, because it also involves more people. I mean, you've got the 4 people who were part of the heist, and then I think there were other people involved in the getaway. And then if you then go to someone to melt down precious metals, and then someone else to actually split up the stones, your network is widening, and you only have to get someone to spill the beans, kind of thing. So it's complex situation for them. And the other thing is that, unfortunately, if they were going to do that, they'd probably be onto it pretty quickly, so that they could say, basically, so they haven't got the evidence if they were caught.
Yeah, and given there are so many people involved, what are the chances of someone squealing, perhaps, and what are the chances of these items actually being recovered?
Yeah, it's interesting, because if you look at other cases, there's one that I've been known about for quite some time and have been writing about, and that was a case in 1977 in Sydney. There was an exhibition of the fabulous Australian artist Grace Cossington Smith, and she had an exhibition at the Dela Gallery, the Macquarie Galleries, and 28 of her paintings were stolen by 3 men overnight, and now they have never ever emerged. And it's really interesting that that 3 people, 50 years basically, and nothing has been recovered. So, but you only have to get one person who, as I said, spills the beans, kind of thing. So it's difficult. So in terms of recovery, though, they reckon, and this is a really hard thing to measure, that only about 10% of artworks, objects are ever recovered internationally. And that's a really low figure.
Jewellery expert Alexander Leger fears the worst.
On les retrouvera jamais.
We'll never find them, he tells me. Diamonds don't beep when you take them through airport security. He assumes the treasures will be broken up and sold for a fraction of their real value. But that's not the worst of it. What does the loss of these jewels mean to France?
C'est la France.
This is France itself that has been stolen from us, he says. It's not just a piece of history, it's a piece of our country.
Tell me about the most notable heists in New Zealand.
Most notable. Well, I guess the ones that are probably most public. The first one I would say would be in 1998 from Auckland Art Gallery. There was an armed robbery, and the guy took a painting called Still on Top by the French painter James Tissot. It was actually recovered, but it had been really badly damaged, and it took the conservator Sarah Hillary there 2 years to piece back together. But it was recovered, so that's kind of empowering. And then the other one is more recent. It was on April Fool's Day, 2017. The 2 Lindau portraits were stolen.
Right.
Yes, from the International Art Centre in Parnell. And, look, again, you woke up and see the story and think, oh, my God, 1st of April, is this, a joke? And, of course, it was not. It took 5 years for those works to come back to be recovered. So they were really big news stories at the time. They were significant artworks, and there were lots of questions asked around both of those. Certainly Auckland Art Gallery, when the work had been completely conserved, they did a wonderful marketing job of relaunching the painting out into the community, and they told the story of the work, that the 2-year program to basically literally piece it back together too. So that was really good, and the staff there, I know, were always very proud that more people, I think, saw that exhibition than went to see the baby lion cubs at the zoo or something like that. It was, really, really popular because it was a story, because it was an armed robbery and the security guard was injured during the process. It was all very dramatic. It was very Netflix-like. It stayed in the news for a long time. Yeah, so.
Is that why people, you think, really grab onto these kind of heist stories? I mean, you've written books about the subject. Why are people so interested in these things?
I think, deep down, people really care about what are in our collections because it's part of our collective history. Whether, it's the royal jewels in France or taonga here or whatever, people care about that because they're irreplaceable. A 19th century French painting in Auckland, you can't just buy another one. They're highly valuable, or the artist has been dead for so long, it's not like they can just whip up another one. So people actually really, really care about our culture, about objects, and I think that's the intrigue. Yeah, maybe it's also because there's kind of a point of difference. It's like I've been amazed at how much international media interest there has been about this story, and yet it's a tragic story in many ways because it's part of history that might never come back to the Louvre, those precious objects.
But here's a mistake. They dropped one of these brooches. They only robbed, nine? I think it was 9 brooches, diamond-like pieces. Well, you just dropped a ninth of your whole entire load right there. That's an amateur move. I never dropped a piece of jewelry ever in 25 jewelry stores and $18 million. It's not going to happen. They also got the motorcycles caught right away. I mean, they're done there. What are they going to find? They found a vest. They found one of the construction vests already. So they made a couple of, I call them amateur mistakes, but they did get away with a lot.
And we often talk about money behind these things, but many of these pieces are just they're priceless, right? You can't put a number on them. In terms of worldwide, I suppose, what has been the biggest heist or something that has never been recovered, that's remained a mystery? Because I know that the Mona Lisa was taken and recovered. Is there anything out there that, remains to be seen? Could be hanging in some billionaire's condo or something.
In their lair, like in the James Bond movie. Yeah, look, there's a couple of points there that I'd make. One is that, we talk about monetary value, but of course there's obviously different kinds of value. There's sentimental value and there's cultural value, art historical value, and so on. There's a case that's still unsolved, unrecovered works in Boston, the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. They had 13 works taken back in 1991. And, we're talking about Rembrandt's and Vermeer and Manet, really, really significant artworks. And they were taken St. Patrick's Day. The 2 guys had dressed up as police officers and managed to get into the building, and they took these works away. And they have never, ever been recovered. And what is really eerie, because I've actually visited the museum earlier this year, are the empty frames. You go in there and there are still the frames where they actually took the artworks from, which, is a poignant reminder that there used to be a Vermeer there or a Rembrandt or a Renoir, etc. And you kind of think, where are they now? And so that's been a long time. And they say that they can't even put, a figure on that, but basically it's millions. But as you said, they're irreplaceable. It doesn't matter how much, if you could get the insurance money, can you replace them? Possibly not.
No.
Yeah, I mean, and in Australia, there was the story in 1986 from the National Gallery of Victoria in Melbourne. There, Picasso was taken, a 1937 painting called Weeping Woman. And at the time, there was a lot of information out there in the media about how much it was worth, in dollar cents kind of thing. And it's now worth, supposedly a lot more. But the great thing was that it was recovered, so that was a feel-good story kind of thing. So, look, sometimes there are recoveries, but sometimes not. But, yeah, putting that dollar figure on, it's kind of, in a way...
It's irrelevant, right?
It's irrelevant. It's arbitrary because it's also... people say, oh, how much is that worth? It's like, well, it's not like a public art museum or gallery are ever going to sell the work. So, yeah, it's kind of a bit of a moot point.
And in terms of, I mean, what does one do with a stolen painting? Because with the jewels and everything, I understand the logistics around, getting someone to unpiece it and then trying to sell off individual pieces. But if somebody has the Mona Lisa or a Rembrandt in their living room, it's going to be instantly recognisable, isn't it? So what is the marketplace? Is there some kind of deep, dark corners of the web where you can sell it, or?
Well, there is, but I mean, the thing is, you still couldn't, have it above your mantelpiece, kind of thing. Is still going to be found out. So unless you've got it in a cupboard and you just kind of open the doors and have a little look every day, yeah, it's very hard. That's right. So, and you can't move these goods. The value of them, decreases hugely, obviously, because you can't sell them because you haven't got any proof of ownership. You haven't got any provenance with that work. So it's who's going to fork out all that money for something like that. So yes, absolutely. It's they kind of people they hit a brick wall, I guess, and realize that they can't sell these works. Sometimes in that case, the works might be recovered. They might give a tip off, whatever, but yeah, you're right. What can you do with them?
I can't think of anything more selfish.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a really nice way of putting it, because you're depriving so many people of their cultural history. Absolutely. It's a very, very selfish act.
Thank you so much for joining us, Penelope.
You're welcome. Thanks, Chelsea.
That's it for this episode of The Front Page. You can read more about today's stories and extensive news coverage at nzherald.co.nz. The Front Page is produced by Jane Yee and Richard Martin, who is also our editor. I'm Chelsea Daniels. Subscribe to The Front Page on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and tune in tomorrow for another look behind the headlines.